Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Proverbs chapter 3 in our continuing study of this book. So far, we've been in that opening section, the appeal to wisdom. We've gone through chapters 1 and 2, and now we come to chapter 3. We're seeing 10 speeches. We've seen 4 of them already in chapters 1 and 2. Chapters 3 and 4 are going to have the next one of those speeches. We begin then, chapter 3, verse 1, my son, and that marks a new section. Whenever you look for my son, just, more times than not, that marks a new section. Do not forget my teaching. Now, notice that he's going to be giving the value of why you want to hold on to his teachings. Do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. Teachings and commandments are that's two different ways of saying the same thing. And here's why, for length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Next we have do not let kindness, and that word kindness, our old friend chesed, sometimes we render it loving kindness. That works. The translation I like for nearly all its uses is going to be loyalty. Let me change that. Do not let loyalty and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart. So notice these are described in terms of being ornaments. You bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your house, of your heart. So you bind them, you write them, and the result, verse 4, so you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and men. That's loyalty toward others, but mostly I think it's loyalty toward God. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Now we're going to have that trusting theme, the value of trusting and acknowledging God. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. You say it in the positive, trust in the Lord. You say it in the negative, don't lean on your own understanding. That's the opposite of trusting in the Lord. Next, in all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. So notice trusting now in verse 6 is acknowledging him. And if you do that, then he's going to reciprocate. Verse 7, do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. This is all about humility. Don't think of yourself as so great. Think of God as great. He's the great one. And so it's going to tell us that humility with God, actually, we're going to see this part in verse 8, humility before God is healthy. So don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, turn away from evil. Verse 8, here's the result. It will be healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. It's actually healthy, healthy to be humble. Honor the Lord from your wealth. Now, here's the profit of putting God first. Honor the Lord from your wealth and from the first of all your produce. Israelites were told to do this, and it's good for us to do it as well. Put God first, make him a priority, the priority, I should say. Verse 8 is the result. So your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. And again, God honors you when you put him first. My son. Oh, whenever I see my son, that's signifying a new section. So, my son, do not reject the discipline of the Lord or loathe his reproof. So, we're going to see now the value of God's discipline. Notice his discipline, his reproof, those are two ways of saying the same thing. So, discipline, reproof, for whom the Lord loves, he reproves, even as the Father corrects the Son in whom he delights. Loving and delighting, two ways of describing the same thing. So anytime you don't understand one line, you go to the next one, and it explains the first one, or vice versa. Verse 13, how blessed is the man who finds wisdom. So now we're going to see the value of wisdom. How blessed is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding. So wisdom, that's been an ongoing theme so far. It's going to be an ongoing theme all throughout the Proverbs. And remember, we noted that the word wisdom, chachma, is feminine. All nouns in Hebrew are either masculine or feminine. There's no neuter in Hebrew. So how blessed is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding. For her profit, well, whose profit? That's talking about wisdom. Her profit is better than the profit of silver, and her gain better than fine gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire compares with her. So this is all speaking of wisdom. Long, still on wisdom, still on the value of wisdom. Long life is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honor. Now, sometimes there's a distinction between right hand and left hand. In this case, her both hands are full of good stuff. Long life, riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life. Now that's an interesting analogy, because when you hear tree of life, you automatically think back to the book of Genesis. There's going to be a few things in this chapter that remind us of the book of Genesis, and this is one of them. She is a tree of life. Now, notice it's not the tree of life, but she is a tree of life, just like that was in Genesis. She's a tree of life to those who take hold of her. And happy are all who hold her fast. Hold on to wisdom. That's the point. Now, speaking of wisdom, this is how, still on the value of wisdom, how the Lord himself found wisdom to be of value. The Lord, by wisdom, founded the earth. By understanding, he established the heavens. By his knowledge, the deeps were broken up and the skies drip with dew. Notice it looks back at what creation was involved with, how the Lord, by wisdom, understanding, knowledge, he brought about the world, and the skies dripping with dew. In other words, we're still enjoying the world today. We're still enjoying the benefits. We're still enjoying the benefits of that ongoing wisdom. My son, as soon as you hear of my son, you know there's a new section. My son, let them not vanish from your sight. Now, what's the them? Look at the next line. That's going to explain it. Keep sound wisdom and discretion. That's the them. So we have now the security of wise living. If you don't let them vanish from your sight, if you keep sound wisdom and discretion, notice they will be life to your soul and adornment to your neck. Now, soul and neck, to our ears in English, they don't sound like they're the same thing. They do in Hebrew. In Hebrew, the word soul, nefesh, it's got two different meanings. Your nefesh, it's literally your throat. You say, really? Your throat? So you know how throat and neck mean essentially the same thing. Soul and neck essentially mean the same thing in Hebrew. It doesn't work in English. And you say, well, soul and neck, really? That's because have you ever seen somebody make that little like cutting sound, cutting sign across their neck? They take their finger and they put it across their neck, and that's sort of an indication they're going to die. You know, but that's pictures life and breath. You stop breathing, and pretty soon you're dead. So nefesh in Hebrew is soul, but it's also your neck or your throat. So if you wanted to render one of these throat and the other neck, that would work nicely. But there'll be life to your soul and adornment to your neck. Then you will walk in your way securely. Your foot won't stumble. When you lie down, you'll not be afraid. When you lie down, notice this is repetition, but each one has a different clause. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. So whether you're waking, whether you're walking, whether you're lying down, whether daytime or night, wisdom is a great companion to have with you. We continue the security of wise living. Do not be afraid. And here's the first of what's going to be 7 do nots. Do not be afraid of sudden fear, nor of the onslaught of the wicked when it comes. For the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being caught. If you're holding on to wisdom, if you're engaging in wise living, you don't have to be afraid because God is your confidence. Second, do not. We're still, and this time we're switching over to the wisdom in dealing with your neighbor. But here's our second do not. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due. Now, this is just good common sense. This actually sounds like more of the later Proverbs. We're going to see Proverbs that echo these things. This is how to get along with people. Do not withhold what is good to those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to do it. Now, there's times where you might owe something to somebody, a good thing. You know, we're not talking about paying back evil, but where you owe something good and you're not able to repay. That's understandable. If you can't repay, you can't pay. But when you can, then pay it back. Just pay your debts. That's the idea here. Verse 28, another do not. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come back, and tomorrow I will give it when you have it with you. Now, verse 28 is basically just echoing the same truth of verse 27. When you are able to pay back something, do so. Don't put it off. Don't procrastinate. If you can pay that person back, do it. Do it now. Verse 29, our third do not devise harm against your neighbor. Still is dealing with your neighbor. Do not devise harm against your neighbor while he lives securely beside you. Verse 30, do not contend with a man without cause if he has done you no harm. In a sense, those two are joined. Don't harm your neighbor. Let him be your neighbor. Let him be a good neighbor and be a good neighbor to him. And then don't contend with a man without cause if he's done you no harm. Don't pick fights. There's no reason to do that. Verse 31, do not envy a man of violence, somebody who's just a violent person, and do not choose any of his ways. Don't follow that way. You want to live peacefully. Living peacefully is good, is better. And let me just say, it's also healthier than being a person of violence. Remember how the New Testament says he who lives by the sword has a tendency to die by the sword. Verse 32. Now this is just summing up everything we've saying. For the devious, do not choose any of his ways. That was the final do not. Now verse 32. For the devious are an abomination to the Lord, but he is intimate with the upright. And so that's the sort of the so what of those sections. Finally, verse 33, the curse of the Lord is on the house of the wicked. And we're going to have three contrasts. First contrast is between the cursing and the blessing. The curse of the Lord is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the dwelling of the righteous. Second contrast, though he scoffs at the scoffers, yet he gives grace to the afflicted. Notice the contrast is between the scoffing and the grace, and the scoffers and the afflicted. Notice how scoffing and scoffers sort of go together. Grace and afflicted ones here go together as well. Think about that. And then our final contrast, the wise will inherit honor, but fools display dishonor. Now, summing up in verses 1 through 10, introduced by our first, my son, we had exhortations to wise living and the benefits there. That was verses 1 through 10. Next, the next, my son, gave us sort of what we could call an ode to wisdom, a song of wisdom, praising wisdom and its benefits and taking us all the way back to creation. That was verses 11 through 20. The third, my son, in verse 21, the exhortations to wise living and practical advice in some various areas of life. We saw the 7 do nots and those contrasts. And what we see next, well, you say, wait a minute, that completes the chapter. But the next section is going to begin in chapter 4, verse 1. And the next, hear, O sons. And it's going to give us exhortations to wise living and its benefits. And we'll see that next time.